Confessions of a Deranged Homosexual. The couch in the study room in Building F of Heritage Halls has silky smooth seats. I know because I spent a day lying face down on the couch, nose bent as I stared unseeing at the seat back. 2 days had passed since I planned my death. Having a suicide plan became liberating, in a way. I had lived my life. Everything going forward was just bonus. For the first time, I pondered what I wanted out of life. It was a moment of uncharacteristic critical thinking, free of outside influence. New thoughts and ideas formed in my mind. For the first time, I refused to discredit a thought simply because it conflicted with my model of how the world worked. My life was mine, and no one would decide my fate but me. I took stock of my options. It seemed I had 4. The first was to marry a woman. Just get married. Sexuality wouldn't be a big problem if I had a stable relationship that transcended physical attraction. I just didn't know how to make it work. Another option was to remain celibate. If I wanted to stay in the church, this was my only alternative to traditional marriage. But neither option would work for me. The third option was to live an alternative lifestyle. This option sickened me. I had always hated myself for liking men. That path could not bring peace. How could it, given all I had been taught? The last option was to commit suicide, a tantalizing solution to a personal hell. Suicide was an escape from the shit selection of choices life or God had given me. Each choice was a dumpster fire, requiring a sacrifice of monumental importance. Dad called while I considered these things in the study room. We had talked often in recent weeks. I answered the call. We spoke for 5 minutes, getting pleasantries out of the way. "How are things going with that guy you've been seeing?" Dad asked, referring to Easton. I had told no one about Noah. There was too much shame there for me to tell anyone about that just yet. Not super well," I said. I sat up on the couch with a suppressed groan. Why was I always so tired lately? I ran my hands through my hair, trying not to look like I had spent the entire afternoon on the couch, in case anyone walked in on me. "I don't think he really wants to date." "Well, that happens," Dad said. "People sometimes aren't a good match for one another." Of course you would have that opinion, I thought. I wanted to cry. I wanted him to tell me Easton was just going through a hard time, and he would come around, eventually. "Johnny?" Dad's voice said through the phone. "I'm here," I said. "You sound depressed. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You're probably going through a lot of cognitive dissonance right now," Dad said. "No, I'm not, Dad." "Do you know what cognitive dissonance means?" "Yes, I know what it means," I snapped. I didn't. "Okay," Dad said. "I know you don't plan to leave BYU, but I think you need to get a copy of your transcripts. You don't want them to have a problem with you being gay, and then locking your transcripts so you can't transfer schools." I rolled my eyes at this. He was always ready to tell a story about how the church was some diabolical overlord you had to look over your shoulder for. "I'll do it sometime." "I'm just saying," Dad said. "You never know what can happen in that kind of environment." "Why do you do that?" I asked. "Do what?" Dad asked. "Demonize the church." I stood from the couch, beginning to pace around the study room. I was talking on my headphones, so I circled the room with my hands in my pockets. You could see a good chunk of campus from the 2nd floor, including the bell tower. "I just worry about you being there," Dad said. "Things are volatile in the church right now with the new policy. And I know, in the past, the school has tailed gay students." "Dad?" I said. "I'm sorry. I don't want to talk about BYU right now." 2 months had elapsed since my last meeting with Bishop Stoll. Since then, I had lost my virginity and jeopardized my most meaningful relationship. As a result, I ghosted Bishop Stoll and stopped attending church altogether. Unfortunately, the prospect of free food at a start-of-semester linger-longer succeeded in luring me out of my apartment. On occasion, student wards held linger-longers after church, providing lunch to poor students. Bishop Stoll watched the event from the periphery, of course. He cornered me and scheduled a meeting on Sunday to follow up with our last conversation. He said, "I want you to keep following up with me. I feel it's important to return and report." I inwardly rolled my eyes, but agreed to meet nonetheless. Bishop Stoll's radar was already fixed on me. I couldn't avoid him without risking my ecclesiastical endorsement. And so, I resigned myself to return and report on all the gay sex I had had in the last month. He sat across from me on his conference table desk. It was Sunday, after church. Bishop Stoll and I were alone in his office. "So, Jonathan," Bishop Stoll began our meeting once we opened with a prayer. "How have things been going?" I shrugged. "Fine, I guess. I was happy to see you at church earlier. I suppose it's been a while. How have things been going with what you told me last time we met?" "Not great," I said. "Things have been kind of hard." Bishop Stoll leaned forward with laced fingers, elbows on his desk. "How so?" "Just with school and everything. I don't know." My response was lame, even for me. "I feel like there's something more," Bishop Stoll said. "Tell me what's on your mind. I can't help you if you won't talk to me." I stayed silent. Bishop Stoll never broke eye contact with me, but he must have known I would respond because he waited. Classic missionary tactic. "I messed up." My voice sounded weak and distant. "How so?" "With a guy." "When you say you messed up with a guy, do you mean you were physical with a man?" I nodded. Bishop Stoll leaned forward, a stern expression on his face. "I need to know exactly what happened so I can know how best to proceed." "We had sex." I flung my hand up in frustration. "What else do you want to know?" "We were naked. There was penetration." Bishop Stoll swallowed. "How many times did this occur?" "Several," I said. "We sort of dated for about a month." "Are you still in contact with him?" I shook my head. "I broke up with him because it was too hard for me. I've been suicidal since." Bishop Stoll stared blankly back at me. I would have loved to know his thoughts. "Have you considered going to a counselor?" I nodded. "I'm meeting with a BYU counselor tomorrow." The day after my suicidal thoughts began, I went to the counseling center and reserved the counselor with the earliest open appointment. "Good," Bishop Stoll said, refocusing on the important matter, my sin. "Jonathan, I just want to impress upon you the seriousness of what you've told me. Being gay is not the issue. The issue is that the Lord has set bounds for how and when physical intimacy is supposed to occur." "I'm aware," I said. It was an argument I had heard time and again growing up. It's an argument tailor-made to send gay people down a mental carousel. Being gay is not the issue from the church's perspective, but ultimately it's the only issue. The church requires that queer people forgo their desires to avoid sullying the sacred power of procreation. It sounds reasonable until you're the one who must abstain. And then the expectation becomes a millstone around your neck. Life would be so much easier without the millstone. But the second you remove it, you're asked to leave, as if you're the one being difficult. And again, I'm concerned about your disposition. I feel like I had to pry the information out of you. Bishop Stoll curled his fingers before himself. Your actions here don't show me you're repentant for what you did. It's not an easy thing to talk about. My indignant voice just escaped becoming a seethe. I had been more openly hostile toward Bishop Stoll since our last meeting. My emotions toward him were a smoldering dislike. Something about the privacy of the meeting and the openness of the discussion brought out the anger I otherwise would have tried to ignore. Still, despite my anger, I needed to attempt humility. Talking my way out of responsibility for Claire had been easy enough. It was all her doing. But dating Noah had been my choice, and that would open me up to scrutiny. Working with Bishop Stoll and appearing contrite was my best chance of remaining at BYU. I turned my anger down several notches. My hesitation doesn't mean I'm secretive. I'm not. Some things are hard to say. Bishop Stoll nodded, seeming to take this as a valid argument. Fair enough. I'm glad you told me. What we've discussed warrants a disciplinary council. Do you understand? I shrugged. I thought it might. Never in all my life would I have thought I would ever be under consideration for a church disciplinary council. I won't share any details of our conversation with my counselors without your permission. However, they could more readily help the situation if they were aware. So I would prefer to tell them. May I have your permission to share our conversation tonight with my counselors? I paused, then nodded. I'll have my counselors deliver a letter to you giving details of when the council will occur. Bishop Stoll seemed to trail off, and his following words seemed to be spoken more to himself than me. The letter needs to be delivered by 2 members of the bishopric. I waited. Just so you're aware, the results of a disciplinary council can have one of 4 outcomes, Bishop Stoll said. The first and least likely is excommunication. Disfellowshipment is the second. Formal probation is the third, and the last is no action. I cleared my throat. Will this affect my schooling? Bishop Stoll paused, seeming to consider his response. Excommunication and disfellowshipment would require you to stop your schooling. Excommunication indefinitely. Disfellowshipment for the duration of the time allotment. Probation would not affect your ecclesiastical endorsement. I swallowed. My schooling at BYU could well end mid-semester. I felt strangely surreal. Perhaps the reality of the situation hadn't set in yet. Or I had achieved a new level of stoicism, probably a bit of both. I will need your temple recommend, Bishop Stoll said. I held my breath for an absurd moment, thinking I might claim it wasn't on me. Months had passed since he revoked my temple privileges for something I didn't do. Now I was losing the actual card. With a plunging feeling in my gut, I withdrew my wallet and handed him my temple recommend. Bishop Stoll accepted it, saying he would keep it safe for the time being. He then asked me to say a prayer in closing.